All right, greetings everyone. Welcome back. I'm Taya Bolton and I'm your producer of Aspire Conversations. And I definitely want to welcome you to our final session of 2020. Thank you for hanging in there with us and being so engaging with all these conversations. We would not be able to do this without you. We are going to bring you yet another amazing session today with some amazing people. And just as a reminder, Aspire Conversations is a solution focused series dedicated to addressing systemic injustice in the Black business community. This series was birthed out of the Black Lives Matter movement and for Aspire that became a Black Businesses Matter movement. These sessions always include special guests who are policymakers, small business owners, and other community leaders. At the end of the sessions, we'll do a call to action. We ask that you join us in moving those calls to action forward. We need you to be part of the solution. To see the schedule for 2021 and to see our solidarity statements, you can view Aspire's website at aspirecommunitycapital.org/Aspire Conversations. Today's session is on mental health in the Black community, coping and realizing triggers. And without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get things turned over to our CEO, Manuel Campbell.
And thank you, Taya, for that wonderful introduction. It's certainly an honor to have such an amazing panel here with us today to really kind of focus on the challenges and coping with some of the triggers of mental health in the Black community. It is an honor that I have to introduce one of the Aspire family members, Mr. Sporty King of the Top Line LLC. Sporty, and I love the way that he kind of defines it, the essence of who he really is, which is a certified human professional and a certified mastery stress educator. And it's an honor to have someone of Sporty's ilk to really kind of share and guide this conversation. And I'm so looking for such an exciting and in-depth assessment of mental health in the Black community. Sporty, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, great. Thanks, Manuel. Hey, look, you know what? I want to reintroduce the session by actually taking the title and turning it around and introducing it from the subtitle, because so often one of the challenges in our lives is that we get caught up in the headlines and we miss the subtitles. The subtitles are often where we really need to be living. So I'd like us to talk about coping and realizing triggers, mental health in the Black community. Because as we talk about solutions, we want to let that be the driving force. So it's the coping and realizing the triggers, what we really want our listeners to be hearing and our panelists to tell us about. So today we've got three wonderful panelists. I've got Kobe Campbell with the Healing Circle Counseling and Wellness, James Lee with the Stan Greenspan Center for Peace and Social Justice, and JB, also known as Jairus Bell, with Christ-Centered Community Counseling, which is C4. What I would like each of our panelists to do is tell us a little bit more about how you share your compassion by weaving it into the answer for this first question. And the first question is going to be, is mental health awareness a Black community only thing? And how do you see its connection or disconnection with other communities? And actually, I'd like to start with you, JB, because there's something on your site that I think was a wonderful quote that you used as a title that we get caught up in. And you said, counseling isn't for Black people. And you said it kind of nicely tongue in cheek. So please, JB.
Uh, yes, thank you for the opportunity. And I would say that it is not a Black only issue. Let me repeat that again. Mental health is not a Black only issue. A little bit about me is I specialize in trauma across the lifespan as well as community trauma. And there is this movement in America where we are beginning to recognize how even systemic racism has mental health implications. The term that is being used is called racialized trauma. And even in the notion of systemic racism and slavery causing trauma to our bodies, to our brains, the idea of it is it not only impacts people of color, but it also impacts Caucasians. You might wonder, well, how can a Caucasian be traumatized or have symptoms when they're dealing with Black issues? Where that's part of the reason what we're seeing why the conversation is so hard to have. One of the things that's indicative of trauma is avoidance. And so for years, our country has avoided the conversation of race. Another one that is indicative of trauma is the ability to dissociate from the issues. And how many of you all know that we often have to lay down, what's going on in our own hearts and our own minds just to be successful in America? The requirement is that you adopt white supremacy. With all that being said, we as people are impacted by trauma because whenever an individual sees another individual on another person's neck saying, "I can't breathe," that image has psychologically impacted all of our brains. And so it's not just a Black issue. I will say that, and I will say that we often suffer more because there has not been given reparations or opportunities for us to heal from the perpetrators in the US who have really perpetrated against us as African Americans by condoning trauma as a way of control.
Great. And thank you for even repeating your line at the beginning. Yeah, it is not a Black community only. Repetition is the key. We learn through repetition, and we need to keep hearing that message, as well as how you stretch it out into talking about people. We're talking about a community, but guess what? Healthcare professionals are not all of one culture. The doctors, the lawyers, everybody, retail. So it definitely stretches out. So thank you. Kobe, on your site, I see some wonderful self-proclaimed activities that you do that I think that are great toward helping us deal with the stress and mental health. So you are a self-proclaimed singer, dancer, and a guitar player. So, but again, weave us in a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, hey everyone. How are you? I'm Kobe. Similar to JB, I specialize in trauma with a concentration in Christian counseling. Many of the people I serve are people of color who are also believers. JB made such an important point. I feel like what he was communicating was to be a perpetuator of trauma, you are traumatizing yourself. To dehumanize another human being is inflicting trauma on yourself, right? There's a part of you that has to deny the humanity of someone else, a part of you that has to deny the reality of someone else's desire to live and right to live, right? And when we separate someone's humanity from who they are, we do it to ourselves. Everything that we do to other people, we are also doing to ourselves. So I would agree with him in saying that mental health is not a Black community only issue, because the issues in the Black community didn't start with the Black community, right? The issues of mental health in the Black community right now began with our lack of resources, our lack of access to mental health care, and we didn't inflict that on ourselves. Right. And so all of us are intertwined in this process of addressing mental health. I will say, I think it's our season. Never in history have there been this many Black leaders in the mental health field. Never in history have there been this many people who have the faces of people that we trust. Right. And so I think that all of this is coming up now because Black people have a voice that is distinct in the mental health field. And that is why we're appealing to much more people.
Thank you. And and I love how things work, because when I decided I wanted you to go second, and I thought about those self-proclaimed accolades that you have yourself, which are also great stress relief
Yeah.
strategies. And
Yeah.
then sure enough, you walked us right into talking about how we can be self-proclaimed trauma recipients,
Yeah.
and how you have to separate, when you separate, how you shouldn't separate a person from who they are. And then I love what I call the pronouns of responsibility. You kept
Yeah.
talking about I, we, our. And so, once we start looking at that, I think that we then get a better chance to get to what? The solutions, the
Yeah.
coping, and the strategies, because you're going to talk. What are one of the triggers that you think you have to deal with the most in terms of your clientele?
I think the greatest trigger that I deal with in my clientele is embarrassment.
Okay.
Right. I think embarrassment is oftentimes at the root of, I feel this way, but I shouldn't feel this way. I think this, but I shouldn't think this. I'm upset about this, but I shouldn't be upset about it. Right. There's this kind of this top layer standard of how people should respond to adversity and to hardship. And so many people are enslaved by that so strongly that they struggle to get in touch with what they're actually experiencing. Also, JB said something that was so important. Trauma affects our bodies, right? Mm-hmm. Epigenetics tells us that trauma is passed down genetically, right? There's a reason why Black women were experimented on, in the OB field, and we have the highest rates of uterine fibroids. Right? Trauma is literally passed down in our bodies. And I think for many of us, we're holding this trauma in our bodies. It's manifesting in the ways that we live our life and the things we physically experience. And yet we're struggling to find a connection between what we're physically experiencing and what we're emotionally experiencing, though they're very intricately connected.
Yeah. Thanks. And connection, speaking of connection, James, I'm going to come over to you because of your military background. I know there's a great deal of connection need in the military, because one thing that you do learn in the military, that it's not always about separating races and cultures, but it's respect and protect. So thank you for your service, and thank you for answering the call to military. How would you weave in what you do to that opening question? I'll restate it because it's been a while since we've heard it. Is mental health awareness a Black community only issue? And how do you see its connection or disconnection with other communities?
I got I got a really good friend I graduated with in high school. George is a real close friend of mine. He actually, I was initiated into a club that he was in. He actually came to the hood to wake me up, to tell me that I was part of the team, which was a very good experience for me. I love George, and I know that if I went to his community, I'd be protected. He knows if he came to my community, he'd be protected. But George is privileged. So when our present president came in, I put a post up about my my observation about when I'm watching commercials, I see more white men and Black women than I see Black men and Black women, right?
I've noticed that.
And that bothered me one day, so I just posted a little something of my concern about, are y'all looking at this? So he hits me back on Facebook, and he starts to go on to, oh, you're always making stuff Black. And it's like, okay. So I think for him, because he's privileged, he really wasn't feeling what I was saying. I don't think that people get our trauma. They don't really get the mental health that Black men go through on a daily basis. They don't get how when somebody like me wants to change, I take full responsibility for that. How for some men that's kind of hard for them to do, because of what happened with them in their situation growing up. And I tell George a lot, and I recently sent him a post. When Biden was going to win and everybody knew it, he's like, he put this post up about something about Biden, and then I reposted like, here we go again, another 4 years. And then you should have seen the stream of people that were coming on and saying stuff like, you know, I mean, some just crazy stuff to where you knew that there's still a disconnection between how George thinks a black man is and how I know how a black man is, and some of the mental health issues that I've dealt with personally. Substance abuse, feeling a failure as a father, you know, and even as a son, my mother went through cancer and died through cancer in my substance abuse. So that tore me up. But, you know, people don't understand how strong a black man has to be, just to get along in this society, because George don't ever see me. So what I told him is that, George, let's me and you have a conversation this year. You know, he's Republican, I'm a Democrat. But it's like, George, let's me and you talk. Let's me and you have a conversation between me and you. So maybe we can bridge some gaps. Maybe there's some things that I can learn from you and some things that you can learn from me. Because you connected to me because Martin Luther King, in his letter to Birmingham jail, said in it, I can't remember the quote, but it's saying that my destiny as a black man, as African American, is tied to the destiny of America. And until we see that, the people who are at these big tables, they still won't hear us and do anything about our plight, because, you know, you have to really care about somebody to want to do something to help them. So I'm hoping that me and George will be, you know, better friends and better to understand each other, you know. So
Well, James, let me go something that back to what you touched on, because I'm from the older generation, and the funny thing is seeing the mixed couples in commercials. Some people in my age group, I'm in the 60s, they see that as progress. And so it is, I think you bring up a good point, how, you know, everything is not always black and white. There's a mixture in ages. A lot of things we need to consider. Going back to JB's point, you know, about how some Caucasians may be impacted by their fellow African Americans, and then the point you just made with how Martin Luther King tied it all together. So let you just continue with one point, and that I'd like you to bring on to our next topic that I'd like to discuss, and that is, you talked about taking on that personal responsibility, and I see in that you're working with Greenspan Center, and courage to rooted in hope is one of your calling lines in your business. How does that work toward the coping mechanisms that we need to be talking about?
for me, and I'm
Yeah,
on
through what you do. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
How are you helping some of the people cope with, you know, because maybe they don't have the support system that you had, and
well,
when they come.
what I'm doing is, from reading the Chetty report, from reading all these the NAACP report on Charlotte, from reading the report the CMS put out about the disparity of children, from even the county's report on the disparity in the number of funds that go to minority businesses for contracts for the city and the county and school system. From reading all of this stuff, I want to encourage folks, and what I'm doing and what I do on a daily basis is show that number one, it can be done. You can do things to help yourself, but it's the responsibility is totally mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally mine to relieve myself of the guilt and the anger that I had for my sister, who I thought that she ruined my marriage, for the anger that I felt and the shame that I felt for not being a good father and being on the street and not caring what my children were or what was happening with them, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. This so I've prided myself in being a navigator for folks, because I think that's what was given to me. Had somebody to help me navigate through life. My team with the census, and my team with the voter, This is something I didn't do by myself. Had family support throughout everything, but I don't know. I don't know. I think that's about all I can say on that. With
Well, you said a mouthful because you got me swinging over to emotions, anger, shame. JB, you know what? As we look at how anger and shame walk us into trauma, your therapist or your team use what's called the Barnabas model. Is that something that helps us move on to the conversation about how we deal with our emotions?
We used to use that model.
Okay.
We moved into what's known as the Allender theory, because it carries a little more cultural competence with it, and as well as it is trauma informed. You know, that's our faith-based model because we're a Christ-centered counseling center, and so that's a model that we adopted. Pretty much all trauma and all, whether it's the Allender theory, Barnabas model, whether it is cognitive processing therapy for PTSD or trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy for youth or parent-child psychotherapy. All of these models search for what's called the stuck point, or just kind of the root message that we're telling ourselves. And I love what my sister said earlier, because she's right about the embarrassment and shame. Mm-hmm. Like, trauma is rooted in the embarrassment and shame that comes from the individual who both experienced it and perpetrated.
And accepted it, sure. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's shame is a powerful tool. I mean, think about it. It was created in the beginning, right? Just think about, the Genesis. They were naked, they were afraid, and so they
Who told you were naked?
It is that shame that keeps us, right? Shame is a powerful tool. And I don't know if you've ever read the Willie Lynch letter.
Oh, yes.
But it is extremely trauma-based, extremely shame-based, on how to make a slave stay a slave. Mm-hmm. And so it is those messages that at one point were, out front, but now are a little more covert, that still impacts, as my brother said, African-American men. Oh my goodness, what does it say to a man when you see multiple times someone who looks like him who's killed for no reason? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, who's killed for no reason, literally.
Yeah, there's that deeper reason. It's killed to make an example.
The Willie Lynch letter.
There you go. Yeah.
The making of a slave. And so, I mean, to me, shame is a powerful tool, and that we as therapists and working with individuals, we create a space for people to bring that is safe for people to bring the things that they feel so embarrassed and shamed to say to others. And that's where we see the neural pathways, the neural connectors, neuroplasticity, and healing begin to occur in the brain, because we're able to connect with someone in that place of pain who can empathize with us. So there's power in community.
Sure.
There's power in us engaging one another's story. There's power in us creating safe space to just listen sometimes.
Define safe space, because sometimes people have different ways of looking at that.
The way I define safe space is, and the way we define it in our practice, is one, attunement. A space where someone is attuned to your needs specifically. And then 2, containment.
Mm-hmm.
A space where your needs can be contained, where you can say the thing that has embarrassed you or brought you shame, and the person in front of you not fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the repair. And oftentimes in therapy, the repair looks like the empathy that an individual provides, or just letting them know, hey, I hear you, or able to just connect with you in that moment. That's what makes people feel safe.
And Taya didn't tell you this, and Emmanuel, but I'm what I call an acronym addict. And so as I listen to that, your attunement, excuse me, containment and repair, I see the word car, and I see the containment and attunement equals repair, and it's what drives the compassion and gets us to the place we need to be. So thanks. But Kobe, let me run that over to you. What do you think about safe space? Because I even break it down to a smaller level where people say, well, you know what, I'm going through this, but I want people to pray for me, but I'm not going to put it on Facebook because I don't want people to know all my business. But they want prayer. What's a safe space?
Yeah, I think that a safe space is a space that is non-threatening and a space that does not demand anything of you other than you be yourself, right? So when we talk about even, mental health in the Black community, part of the reason why it's kind of taken off in this way and we're even able to have these conversations is because for the first time, people feel like I can speak to this person, and as I'm speaking, I do not have to prove. As I'm speaking, I do not have to validate. As I'm speaking, I do not have to have a list of evidence for why my experience is real, right? A safe place is a place where my word is my word, right? And I do not have to convince you. I do not have to debate you about my experience, right? I always say to my clients, you are the expert of your experience, and you are teaching me how to care for you, right? But for many of us Black people, we've spent most of our lives, just look at this last election, we've mastered the idea of proving that our pain is real. And when you spend so much time trying to prove that your pain is real, prove that your trauma is real, prove that your disappointment and your sadness is valid, you rarely get the opportunity to process it and heal from it, right? It almost distances. It's like the difference between your trauma being inside of you and your trauma being beside you. And for many of us, our trauma has been beside us, right? Okay. It's this thing we refer to as source material to get you to empathize with me. Right? This is my source material to teach you that racism is real. This is my source material to teach you that we are disenfranchised, that we have been marginalized, right? But a safe place is a place where I just get to experience my trauma before another person who's going to respond to me as if everything that I'm saying is 100% true.
So are you also saying that how important it is for us as the person who may be experiencing trauma or around someone who may be, the key is to get inside and accept it as a coping strategy?
Yeah, and I think accept it for what it is in the way that it affects us, right? Because we are so communal, sometimes what we can do is say like, oh man, I'm dealing with this, but I don't want to say this because I don't want to stress my mom out. I'm dealing with this, but my mom's already having a really hard time, so I don't want to put another thing on her plate. Right? So our trauma, it almost feels like it's never just about us. It's about how it affects everyone else. But trauma is a heavy, heavy burden to carry, right? And that's why people spend so much time trying to carry it alone. I don't want to burden you because I love you. But what if loving you meant actually letting you carry that burden with me? That's what a safe place is.
Oh, I like that sentence. Actually letting you carry that burden with me. I remember seeing a little cartoon of oh God, now I wish I had thought of it. Well, it's like Jesus carrying the cross, and then somebody saying that, oh, I'd rather have his problems than mine. And then when they switch and you see how big that cross is, oh, you know what? Let me go back to the medallion. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So James, rolls right into you because you talked about support systems and how important that is. Where do you see the safe space coming into what you do?
Um, uh, it- and where I am, like I mentioned before, I'm living with a young lady, and I see her go through a lot. She's a strong woman. A lot of times, her life is chaotic, and you want to help as best you can. One of the things that we talk about a lot is that you know some things are out of your hands, some things you can't do anything
Mm,
about. So you got these children, you're dealing with the father, one that then you got the other father. So you already got enough on your plate. You even got the big enough heart to accept your niece's son, who's a 1 year old, into your life, right? As a foster child. So you got all of this stuff going on in your own personal life, and
mhm.
she deserves to be where her talent can take her, right? So what I tell her a lot is that, because she's not godly, because she came up through foster care, and she don't believe in faith because faith has failed her, but faith has not failed me. So I think for me, my safe place is to let her see that there's a higher power out there that's looking out for you. And you have to find that space inside of you, um, that's going to calm you so that you can think clear for the future of your children. So one of the things that I try to do with all the clients that I deal with, and all the people that I work around, and all the people who my life touches, is that I don't ever push God on anybody. I talk about the Creator, and there's some things that He's put in us, and one of the things He's put in us is a calming. My space is more inner than anything, because that's where the power comes from, the inside, for me. And that I want to get her to that space where, when life is so stressed, that she can take a moment, and do something that she likes to do, and get a breather, because there's a lot of people that need that that space to just like breathe. And I'm gonna end with this. She made me laugh one day. We were in a meeting, and we she was new to the group, and we're doing our thing, advocating and doing what we do, and it comes up. She says that, something, I ain't even went to the bathroom yet. It's like, wait a minute, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What you mean you went to the bathroom yet? I haven't had time because I've been busy taking care of my family, right? So that inner space, I want to help her to develop that inner space, that she can, trust in things that happen that are out of her control, so I don't know.
Well, thanks for sharing that personal testimony, because sometimes people do have to realize that you're dealing with your trauma at home first, and that becomes important. So I want to come back to JB and Kobe. Now, what happens when someone has to come into a structured setting, which is what both of you house for people? How different, or is that part of the shock, that they go from dealing with home and the willingness to come into a program? JB? Did I say that in English, by the way? Because I know what I was thinking.
I don't know, Kobe, what you think, my sister? I would love to hear your thoughts first.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. I actually think that when people come into therapy, they they experience almost this relief, right? Because it's this place that has no association with any of their stressors, right? It's this place they come in, and it doesn't remind me of, oh man, I gotta do the dishes, I gotta take out the laundry, like, they come into an office and they don't have to maintain it. They're not responsible for cleaning it up. They're not responsible for doing anything except for existing and sharing. And I think that, the idea is we might think that like someone coming into a foreign space may make it difficult for them to open up. But I've found that they come in, they take their shoes off, they be laying down on the couch. I'm trying to figure out, do I tell them to put their shoes back on? You know, it's a space where they are catered to. And especially for this demographic, it's probably the first time they're really experiencing that for just an hour. You know, live just an hour of you talk. It's all about you. I'm not going to bring up anything about me. I'm not going to ask about your kids. I'm not going to ask about your spouse. I'm not going to ask about anything you do. You talk about whatever you want. This is all about you. And for me, I've seen like these grown adults melt into children, melt into like these giddy children who are willing to laugh and be silly, but also cry about things that the world says are insignificant, but they know are significant in their hearts. And so I think that speaks back to what we're talking about with safety, that when we have a separate space physically that people can go to escape the burden of the world, we create a space where they can tap into the truest version of themselves.
And that willingness is super important, isn't it? Heal
Yeah.
thyself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to come to you, JB, but I want to come to you with something that James said, and he said stuff. You know, the people are dealing with stuff, and my acronym for stuff is situations that unleash our focus and faith. And so, with you having a Christ-centered environment, how is the unleashing of the focus and faith important to what you and your therapist administer?
You know, the reality is that, first I want to say, Kobe, I just love your heart and just how you share. You are an inspiration. Thank you for your words. And I want to just say, like, you know, I think we all come into a space carrying stuff. I think probably what saddens me, and it's a hope that I have, is that families can become a safe space to bring stuff. I mean, to me, you know, when you talk about just whether it's entering the counseling room, or safety, or how we unload stuff, you know, from a faith lens, to me, it always comes back to family. You know, because think about it, you know, scripture tells us that Christ came, died for us, so now that we are adopted into the family. And the idea of is that family should be that safe space, right? Family should be the place where we can unload and carry stuff, right? You know, that we're dealing with. And oftentimes family is, especially Black families, we are fighting so hard. We got to fight 10, 20, 100 times just to make it in a society. Because we were stripped of so much of our culture and resources. So the inequity itself makes it hard for Black families to really commune and connect with the freedom of resources that have been passed down generationally. And so, you know, faith to me brings in the counseling room this sense of family. Because we're adopted into the family of God, and we get to also engage one another, not from this space of like, hey, I got it figured out. You know, one of our mottos at C4 is lead out of your own struggle. You know, we can't take people further than we ourselves have been. I tell people all the time, I'm a counselor with a counselor. I have a counselor myself. And so we have to kind of like have that space in an unnatural place like a therapy room, because oftentimes our families of origins are too busy, or they have their own trauma that has never been dealt with.
So tell me this then, speaking to someone who's watching and maybe going through something, should they be discouraged about coming to counseling because they don't think they have the family support?
This is the reality. We live in a fallen world. That means that a perfect family doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so we all used to be able to say, hey, I don't need counseling. I don't have any major things that happening. I don't have any traumas. But guess what? A pandemic is an event that can be identified as a trauma.
Yes.
And so, look, the veil is torn. We are all in the same space, in need of each other and in need of a savior. And a lot of times I tell people counseling becomes the place that as I'm caring for other people, oftentimes God is dealing with me as well, telling me stuff that I need to be working on too.
Amen.
And so I would say, I would question, I really would like for us to get to the place where we're willing to say, okay, my family wasn't perfect. You know, the question is not, did your parents fail you? The question is, how did your parents fail you? Because we're in a fallen world.
As well as how do you perceive that they failed you? Because in fact, they may not have.
Well, I believe that there's no perfect parent.
There you go. Right.
And so every parent has failed. I failed my children.
Gotcha.
And if you're not a parent that has had to repent
I see what you're
for
saying.
wrong that you've done to your kids,
yeah,
I would say that you might be missing a plank that's in your eye.
Yeah.
Because I don't know a perfect family parent. In fact, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve even sinned.
Mm-hmm.
And so if from my belief, not everyone believes this, gotcha. But I believe, and maybe some people do have perfect parents. I haven't seen them. But I would push back and say whether it was not being there all the time, because no parent can be there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they could. They're not omnipresent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of would challenge that process, because the hardest thing oftentimes is for us to accept failure. But reality is we can't love well until we accept the failure too.
Yeah. And you know what? Thank you for challenging it, because what it made me really recognize is that it was word choice. I was hearing family, and then you swung it over to parents. And so I was thinking the whole family failed. And you're right. And that's the thing. We have to take things case by case, individual by individual, as well as what anybody who's looking for therapy needs to know is that you're not going to just say, hey, oh, you know the problem. Okay, you're cured. You're going to make them dive a little deeper. So I thank you.
No, and I want to say, I'm hoping that everybody heard me clearly, because the reality is we're all in the same boat.
Yes.
we all need it. How soon would it take for you to recognize the reality that we can benefit from it? Just as we need medical doctors and pastors for our physical and spiritual health, we need something for our psychological and brain health as well too. And experts in the counseling room can definitely help with that.
And experts and all the facial expressions you're making, Kobe, come on in.
Sorry, I talk with my face sometimes. Yeah, everything he said was so on point. And I think we have to remember that all trauma and all healing happens in relationship, right? And so oftentimes we are hurt in relationship, but we're convinced internally that we'll be healed in isolation, but relational trauma has to be healed relationally, right? And just like, the gospel, and just like healing and the gospel together, they're proactive and they're retroactive, right? No matter where you are in life, what you're going to experience healing in now is going to reshape your perspective of the past and then motivate your perspective of the future, right? And I think that oftentimes people think that, going to counseling is going in, talking about your problem, and having the opportunity to just blame someone. I can't think of how many clients I've had saying, my mom doesn't want me to come to counseling because she thinks I'm just blaming her for being a bad parent. She thinks I'm just blaming her for this. I'm blaming her for that. It's not about blame. It's about discovering in what relationship and how in the relationship I was wounded so that I can heal. And once I heal, since my pain was connected to another person, my healing can be connected to another person, right? And that's why it's so important that we have these corrective emotional experiences, right? In the same way you're hurt, you got to go back to that same territory to find your healing. And that's what counseling is about. So many people are so wounded, they need to be healed in relationship, but they're too scared or just not ready to go heal with the person who hurt them initially, right? So they find a safe relationship in the confidential room of counseling. They heal there. They develop bravery and perspective to go back out into the world and develop healing relationships in places that they previously experienced pain. And I think what's so adaptive about trauma, the redemptive part about trauma, JB said we live in a fallen world, but we also live through a redeemed perspective. The redemption is now I have intimate wisdom about how this pain manifests in my life. That means I have intimate understanding of how I can love someone else who's experienced the exact same thing. And that's why it's so important for just one person in our community to go to counseling, because that one person takes that pain that they've had, they reshape that perspective, and now they have wisdom and they help somebody else heal. That person's pain becomes wisdom, right? And we can turn a community of pain, a community of disconnection, into a community of connected wisdom that we use to bring love, kindness, peace, generosity, all of those things to where we live and where we reside, our homes and our families.
Great. So it's not just each one teach one, it's each one touch one.
Yeah.
So we're closing out here, but I definitely want to get this question on board, and you can shout out who wants to answer it. If you were a local politician, what radical change would you make to positively impact Black-owned business? And would it be radical?
Free healthcare.
Okay.
Working in this nonprofit sector that I've been working in since January of 2019. When you look at the numbers, like for instance, in the county's disparity report, they say that there's not a big enough company in Charlotte to be able to bring the architectural, the development, the research, and all this stuff to do a multi-million-dollar project, right? You got $100 million, but you only give minority businesses $2 million. Or speaking of the Foundation for the Carolinas, they support a lot of causes, but do they support with their money? Do they support enough causes that's going to make a difference? With me being radical, it's just what I'm doing now, and I'm planting seed now. But yeah, radical means that you can't keep feeding the same people when you're trying to help the community as a whole. You can't keep feeding the same organizations, although they're great organizations, right? Roof Above, all these other people, they're great. But what about this organization that this young lady that has a house, she's got 3 families in it, and she's helping those families with upward mobility, right? She needs money. Radical means to me, it's I wish I did have the power. A lot of people wouldn't like me. But guess what? And I'm going to say it like this, and Taya knows this. The county spent $459 million for a white organization to come in to do marketing and advertising for the 2020 census. Me and my group, we went out, we got $100,000 worth of funding. And although we did work with the county on a lot of stuff, they were very supportive of what we did. They didn't stand in our way. And I did have a conversation with the county manager about my concerns about the money variation, but I got over that. and I'm hoping everything is good with her. But I still have a concern about how we spend our money. If you would have gave me $2 million with the team that I had, just looking at the people that we were able to touch with the census and the voter, I know we probably could have tripled that, or even quadrupled that number of folks that we were able to touch with less money. My radicalism is hitting pockets of money and tables of decision where money is talked about, you know. So if I were, I think that's what I would do.
All right, get your name on the ballot. Kobe, do we have your name on the ballot?
We'll work on it. Mandatory free healthcare and also mandatory flex time, right? So what happens is even if someone does have health insurance that works well for them, I've had clients who do not have cars, right? Talking about upward mobility, don't have cars and access to transportation. Our city transportation is not great. So it's taking them an hour to get to my session via bus. It's taking them an hour to get back depending on the time. You only get an hour of lunch. And so they're really having to choose between their mental health and their job, right? And they can't have both. I don't think it's until employers realize that mental health affects their bottom dollar that they will then begin to make the policy changes, right? 1 in 4 people in America deals with one mental health diagnosis. That means 1 in 4 people is taking that into the workplace. That's a quarter of the workplace taking that in. And they're used to leaving that at the door, except for with this pandemic, they can't leave it at the door. That means a quarter of your employees are struggling with their mental health issues at home. And it's affecting how they work.
And I'm glad to, and I'm sure everybody knows that we could go on and on and on. And as us old school people used to say, on and on until the break of dawn. But let me first say, Taya, do we have anything in the chat? And
I am not seeing any questions come through. You all are doing an amazing job, and I would like us to spend these last few minutes just really crafting the calls to action.
okay,
Can I add one more thing?
please.
I want to add reparations to the list. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Free healthcare reparations.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thank you, JB. So Sporty, I've heard some great things come through with that last question, and specifically free healthcare, free mandatory flex time. I heard that we can't keep contributing to the same organizations or people and expect to impact the greater community. There has to be something differently done there. I heard some really amazing nuggets that you all shared throughout the presentation. What we do to others, we do to ourselves. That embarrassment and shame really rules how some of these things happen and then they don't get dealt with, that we can carry a burden together. That is really, really impactful. And that helping one another helping one another helps us to become the best version of ourselves. So there's a lot of information there. Turning a community of pain and trauma into connected healing. So I think there's a lot there to kind of craft some really strong calls to action. So for sure, I see free healthcare. I see the things we just talked about. Is there anything else that you all feel very strongly about that we must do in order to have transformation in the community?
Yes, Kobe.
Yes. So I think we all know when we look historically, whether people are religious or not, the church has kind of been the foundation. It's kind of been like the community center of the Black community. Whether you are religious or not, if the church is serving food, you're gonna go. If the church got Hallelujah Net, you're sending your kids, right? And so for me, what I do and what I'm really passionate about is providing trauma-informed training to churches. Because many people, even who are not religious, when they have some sense of turmoil, are too afraid of the mental health community. And so they go try to talk to the pastor, they go try to talk to a minister, a deacon, or an elder, and they're getting that social support, which is good, but they're not getting that specific, personalized, trauma-informed resource in counseling. And so I do a lot of training in that way, and same with the workplace, right? Something that I'm really passionate about is training employers to understand just how intricately mental health affects their work culture and their bottom dollar, and how they're actually losing more money when they stifle their employees from tending to their mental health.
Yeah, certainly. And it makes me think about the word that was coming to my mind is trust.
Yeah.
And, because if we collectively think about a lot of things that we say, if those employers don't trust their employees, and
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, if the employee doesn't trust the employer, because
Yep.
it's one thing to say we are administering this program, and then another thing to let it go through.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really takes a lot of, and I actually want to throw in something that I got off your site also, Kobe, because I think it actually puts a warm close on it. Oop, and then look at that word close. I'm talking about your apparel line. Protect your peace.
Yeah.
Because I think that is like a great theme in terms of what we're talking about. What's protect? How'd you come up with protect your peace?
Yeah, so my husband and I have a podcast called the Healing Circle Podcast, and we started a clothing line called Protect Your Peace. It's just a shirt that says Protect Your Peace. And I think for so many of us, we are caught up in what the counseling world calls shoulding yourself. I should do this. I should do that. But are we protecting our peace when we're always acquiescing to other people's standards instead of responding to what we authentically desire to do and what's good for us? Right. And so that line is about encouraging people to protect your peace, do what is good for you, do what is helpful for you, what is healthy for you, and don't be influenced by the words of this world that tell you that you need to serve them and not yourself.
Great. James, how about you? How are you protecting your peace?
I went through peer support classes a while ago, and one of the things that our teacher used to ask us is that, because peer support is somebody who has gone through stuff, so they're gonna help somebody else go through some stuff. So he would always come in and ask us, "What did you do for your mental health last night?" so so I started doing on a daily basis, spending 5 minutes, right? Just 5 minutes, just like woosawing, right? It's like I got a woosaw, and when I do that, I'm gaining strength to go on in the fight, right? Because being a military man before, and that, I don't know if you remember in the movie Glory, the night before that heroic battle, although it was lost, but that heroic battle when they were at the campgrounds and they were like singing, but they knew that tomorrow I might not, what I'm saying? So my place of peace is those mental places where I go, whether it's looking at the sky or looking at this row of trees that's out to my left, out to my balcony, that reminds me of the woods that I used to live in. And especially when it rains, especially if it's dark, you know. So I still even go to those dark places where I was to gain peace, even there, even from that, right? Even from that darkness that I was in, and the shame and all these other experiences that I've experienced emotionally. I still look at those stand of trees to my left. And I remember even then I had some peace, but my peace now is different. So mental health is more important to me now than it's ever been in my whole lifetime. And I'm a 60s baby. Because we free, we don't say we free. But do something for your mental health. I encourage everybody to do something for your mental, whatever it is that you do. Read a book, whatever, even if it's just sitting there, just not moving, whatever it is, you know, guard your mental health, because it's going to help you to do your job. It's going to help you to do what God has you to do, because none of us are here for no reason. But once you find your mission and God gives you the mission, he gives you the peace of accepting that I am big enough to do this thing. Right? Because it beginning, it's like, I can't do this. Paul, I can't do this. But it's like, no, you do. You can do. Yes, you can. So the confidence that the Creator has in us and the confidence that he instills in us sometimes has to be gained through those quiet moments that we spend, inwardly, to remember who we were and who I was as an 18-year-old boy going into the military for the first time, going overseas for the first time, leaving my mama for the first time, and my crying the first few months that I was overseas. But then realizing once it got over, men that were able to help mentor me to become a better soldier. So those places of just stepping away, even if it's outside on the balcony, find those places for yourself, and just be in them. So
All right. Okay, JB, close us out.
With a
Especially
prayer.
since yeah, no. Ah, we could do that. We haven't done that yet. But you know what? Especially talked about God and the Creator. I said, oh, great. Something about peace. And then if prayer is all right with me, Ty, you the producer here. But
I would say we. I mean, I was just. When you say close us out, that's the first thing comes to my mind. I'm with you now. My bad. But from I would say, and it's really a journey that I am embarking on myself, is being aware of what's happening in our bodies. Like that matters. When we feel pain, or even taking time to just kind of check in, how is my body? I think we move so fast and we do so much in a day that we're not even aware of the stress and tension and the signals and what our body is communicating to us. And so if there's something that I could encourage everybody to just kind of think more on, it would be checking in with your body, because there's also a sense of being and presence that can help us with, and centering, whether it's checking in with our breathing that our body is doing, our heart rate, our joy. When we feel joy, where is that in our body? When we're sad, where is that in our body? There's something about us connecting to our bodies, and especially as Black people of color, whose bodies have been basically told that it doesn't even matter, whose bodies have been brutalized, whose bodies have been told that it's not worth anything. It doesn't matter. Your body doesn't matter. You don't matter. Black bodies don't matter. In a society that communicates that, whether it is kids choosing out a baby doll and they see the white baby doll is looking better because the culture teaches that a white is right, or whether it is the size of our body that we find ourselves discouraged by because of what society teaches us, to be a toothpick. I don't know, but checking in with our bodies and being more present and aware of what's happening there, it is a journey worth taking.
see, and there we did. You just close us out in prayer. And as they sang in the movie Glory, mm-hmm. Taya, thank you all.
I love it. I love it. Thank you all once again. I want to give Manuel an opportunity to say any final words before I get us officially closed out.
Let me just say, I am, Kobe. I have my feet up and my shoes off, laid back on the couch. This was a very informative and enlightening discussion. I greatly appreciate JB, James, Kobe, Sporty, amazing job moderating. There's always the consideration that as an entrepreneur, in particular a Black business owner, we don't always appreciate or consider the impact of being by ourselves or the feeling of being alone while we're running our businesses. And we don't take into consideration the baggage, if you will, that we bring into our lives, into our families, and certainly into our businesses. So thank you again for your insight and the clarity that you brought to a very difficult conversation. And I greatly appreciate you all for your insight and the intellectual thought and leadership you brought to the discussion.
Thank you for that, Manuel. And I want to echo that. I definitely want to express my deep gratitude for each and every one of you. Sporty, Kobe, James, JB, amazing panel. Manuel, thank you as always for trusting me to lead in a number of ways for Aspire. We know that this was a very important conversation. We definitely were very intentional, as with every other session that we've had, around the timing of when we would do this. And we know that we're in the season of sadness. We know that the holidays are very lonely for a lot of people. The pandemic has put another layer of complexity on that, where people are not able to travel and spend time with their families in the way that they traditionally would. And so I feel like you all brought some healing to our community just in this conversation today. So thank you for stepping up and showing up and being able to share that. Thank you to our sponsor, Start Us Up, a Kauffman Foundation initiative. We want to thank all of our community sponsors as well for helping us spread the word about this series. Wells Fargo Foundation, Packer Place, RevTech Labs, My Brother's Keeper, Charlotte Mecklenburg, Stiletto Boston University, and of course to our amazing team at Aspire and to our board. We are very grateful for you. Happy holidays, everybody. We are looking forward to 2021. We'll have our sessions scheduled and posted for you to register in the next week or two. And we look forward to seeing you in January. Have a great day.